government interventions towards COVID-19, but also look at the situation post-COVID-19. So welcome all. So I'll not give us time for introductions because time is so much spent, but I'll go straight into the agenda of the day. And before I do that, I just want to set a few housekeeping rules. That one, if you are not speaking, please mute your microphone so that we are able to communicate much better. And if you are having an issue to raise, then you can do so by raising your hand. So down there on the bottom right, there's a functionality for raising your hand so that we are able to see you, excuse me, and give you an opportunity to speak. Lastly, if you are a speaker, so that we just confirm that we are not speaking with a ghost, sorry, please just have your video on, but it's not a must. Only if you are comfortable with it, you can have your video on. We'll be doing a lot of presentations, so keep on checking the screen so that you are able to see what we are presenting for better communication. So I think with those few housekeeping rules, we can jump into the agenda of the meeting. And so I want to start by saying that at the regional level, we have been able to undertake a lot of responsibilities which are bestowed on us as an organization towards enriching the knowledge base of the philanthropy sector, specifically the actors who are a member of this network and a member of this forum, together with other development actors who depend on us and how impactful we are to undertake their responsibilities. So we've done a lot in terms of creating knowledge, and when I'm talking about this, I mean towards COVID-19 and other responsibilities which are on our table. The second area that we've done a lot in from the beginning of this year, and at least from the start of the COVID pandemic, is in terms of building of alliances. So as a network, we've led in quite a number of efforts geared towards bringing on board the private sector, the national chambers at the regional level, at the national level, the UN bodies, as we'll hear about that shortly, and all other development actors to enable us break the silos and work as a team. And more of that will follow shortly. And lastly, beyond the COVID-19, we've also had a lot of efforts going on towards ensuring that we promote and work towards having a favorable environment, what we call an enabling environment for philanthropy. Again, there are quite a number of efforts which are being undertaken to that regard, and we'll share about that shortly. So in brief, we want to see the homegrown philanthropy being nurtured, you know. We want to see accountability being promoted in philanthropy. We want to see our members of the forum, the members of the network, other actors within the philanthropy space break silos for broader development financing collaboration. So that is one of the key agenda that we want to pursue this year, so that we can see the space open up for other development actors to come on board. Conversations around the role that philanthropy is playing, for example, in the blended finance chain, you know. So there's a lot of conversations going on, which we feel that we need to actively involve the philanthropy actors in Kenya, as we are doing with the other countries in the region. So today's conversation will majorly focus on the current issue at hand, which is the COVID-19, in terms of what the support and coordination and opportunities which are existing at the regional level, at the national level, and our efforts have been guided in threefold. One are general efforts which we are putting into the space as a whole. So this involves us as the philanthropy space, the government, the private sector, the UN bodies, the national chambers of commerce and industry, amongst many other actors. So that general approach has been our guiding factor. We've also had a lot of convenings and a lot of efforts which are going on, which are sector specific. So we've had convenings in the region and at the national level in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, specifically targeting the disability community, because again, that is the most affected community by this pandemic. So we also had series of conversations and interventions in terms of supporting funders in the disability space and actors in the disability space on how best we can support the disabled community. We've also had sector-specific conversations around food security. And this is the last conversation that we had in Kenya 2 weeks ago, if I'm not wrong. And we just brought together actors within the philanthropy space, government, and other bodies on how best we can position the country to be well prepared, because right now everyone is focusing on health, but there is issues of food security that is now a matter of concern to most of the countries, not just in Kenya, not within the region, but broader in all aspects that we can be looking at. We've also had issue-specific conversations, and a lot of those convenings, I'm glad that most of you have been part and parcel of. And so for the meeting of today, we want to give you an update on the ongoing efforts. The reason why we are giving these updates is not for you to know, but for you to see the opportunities which are existing, because I've received a lot of phone calls from you. The last one I received was from I&M Bank. James is with us here today on what are we doing as the philanthropy space. So there are a lot of efforts which are going on, and there are a lot of opportunities which we have created through these efforts that we also wanted to share with you. From our partnership with the Chambers of Commerce and Industry, to what is going between us and the private sector, to the first conversation we had, which brought together all our members around opportunities which arose, like the Flexi Fund within the NBCC, amongst many other areas that we will explore today. So we will be giving you those updates, but for you to get to see the opportunities which are existing that we can jointly or individually as organizations take advantage of. On top of that, we will be sharing with you one of the issues which came out in the last meeting that we had was the absence of tools for tracking our interventions. And one of our members, Bloodwater, has come up with a very important tool that can really help us to track community monitoring and response tracking. And we'll also have an opportunity to get to see that tool and see how best it can support the work that we are doing. Another issue which came out in the last meeting that we had was around communication, and we've come up with a central communication platform that is regional in nature, but has got every country represented in it in terms of the efforts which are going on from the philanthropy side, the opportunities which are there for funding, and many more for collaborations. We'll also get to see to share that platform with you. And then that will bring to an end our conversation towards COVID-19. After that, we'll have an opportunity to see other ongoing efforts, for example, around working towards an enabling environment for philanthropy actors in Kenya. We have a lot of efforts going on around that, and KCDF through Melvin will be able to give us an update on where we are and what lies ahead of us as we pursue that enabling environment conversation. Again, we have life beyond COVID-19. Again, so after the enabling environment conversation, we'll also be able to see what other plans we are having for the year, and what parts of them can you take advantage of, and can we jointly pursue as a forum and as a network. So to that regard, we have speakers with us today. And the first thing that we'll want to address is we have a lot of opportunities which has been created by the pandemic that we are currently facing. And as you can all see, there's a critical role that the philanthropy space is playing. There's a critical role that the philanthropy actors, you and us included, are playing. And we can see the government and other development actors appreciating that role that we are playing as a sector. And so there's need for a rallying call. There's need for us to come together to be more impactful in the work that we are doing. We need to reflect on this growing role that we are having as a sector, as a country, and as a region. And there are also many opportunities that this pandemic has created and are lying ahead of us. And so we just want to get an official opening remark from Maurice Makolo, who is the Regional Director of Ford Foundation. So Maurice will go first in terms of just bringing out that rallying call for us as a space to rise to the occasion and be more impactful and work together with other development actors to enable us showcase our contribution as a sector, but also position us in terms of being more impactful as actors within the philanthropy space. Then after that, we'll go into the initiatives that I've talked about. We'll highlight the opportunities that are arising from our collaboration with the Business Compact Group. We'll talk about the opportunities that we've created within the Chambers of Commerce and Industry within the region. We'll see about what some of our members are doing at the community level, the issue around community philanthropy. What can we do in terms of financing and operations? And we'll just get to hear from Safaricom Foundation what efforts are going on to that regard and what opportunities are there. And then we'll be able to go into a matter that is of utmost importance right now in terms of collaboration and supporting community resilience towards the pandemic that we are dealing with. We'll look at the opportunities which are arising from the engagements we are having with the government, the UN agencies, and the private sector. So we have Arif who will highlight that for us and the opportunities that has created. Then we'll get to see the tool that I've talked about. Then the element of data. I think this is something that has been coming out a lot of times. And just after COVID had hit us, we launched again an initiative that almost all of you have been part of, and all your efforts were key in ensuring the success of that initiative. And I'm talking about the philanthropy data portal that is now live, and we've been minting a lot of knowledge from it for your consumption. So that is how the day is planned. We plan to be done within the next 1.5 hours. And so I welcome all of you. Please feel free and let us deliberate in a constructive manner, a manner that will ensure that as a space we become more impactful and more responsive to the issues that are expected from us as a sector. So to kick us off, Maurice Makolo, over to you, and thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Evans. I apologize that I will have to run literally after I make my remarks because I have a meeting I'm chairing at 11 and it is outside of where I am now. So please bear with me. I have a few remarks to make, but first I want to salute the Kenya Philanthropy Forum for the conversation today. I also want in a very special way to salute and thank and celebrate the individuals and institutional philanthropies for the amazing work that has been done to date since COVID-19 hit our great republic. I want to say that 2 months of experience with COVID in Kenya gives us some strong hints on what philanthropy can and should do going forward into the future. And I want to just suggest 5 ideas. Number 1, bridge the connection gap. Across the world, it has been team effort in combating this virus between governments, private sector, civil society, philanthropy, multilateral agencies, local communities. It has been a collective effort. And even though a lot has been done, it is still possible to see that the connections are still not great. People still have lots of ways to get how to work together. And I want to suggest, my friends, that when the dust settles, philanthropy needs to enhance and to continue the connections across these actors and help them to find ways in which they can enhance their partnerships in ways that are more effective and more efficient. Philanthropy is uniquely placed to do that because of the manner in which it is constructed, the values that drive it, and much more importantly, the ability to have even patient capital, run this in much of a sprint, but at the same time, know that it is a marathon, and so be able to kind of do short races and long races at the same time. Philanthropy can do that, and I urge that philanthropy should do that. Number two, philanthropy needs to remind and strengthen hope. Without doubt, COVID is testing personal, institutional, community, and governmental hopes, aspirations, and plans. Many people are actually very shaken, worried, anxiety is high. Indeed, questions of mental health are even going higher because of COVID-19. But hope must be maintained. Hope must remain alive. How does philanthropy do that now and going into the future? A, philanthropy must continue to deploy its muscle, the fiscal muscle, the money that it has, as well as the non-fiscal muscle, the connection, the history, the experience, the networks that it brings into this to restore lives and livelihoods. When people who have lost something see that brought back, their hopes become alive. And so philanthropy must continue to invest in every possible way in rebuilding the lives that have been destroyed and restoring livelihoods that have been lost. But at the same time, philanthropy must continue to remind and strengthen hope through the stories of hope, narratives that bring life, narratives of communities overcoming odds, or narratives of people supporting others. Because when all is said and done, like in that famous book of Anthills of the Savannah, that old man says that it is only the story that lives beyond the exploits of brave warriors and the drums of war. The story tells us about what we have overcome. It is our escort. So philanthropy must invest in storytelling so that hope must be maintained, so that we strengthen our resolve to go into the distance. Number three, philanthropy must continue and must help in laying foundations for a more inclusive and equitable post-COVID world. I believe that all of us can testify to the fact that COVID-19 has exposed grave inequities and inequalities in our country. Look at inequalities between the rural and the urban, between some parts of urban centers and others, informal settlements and other parts of this country, between some classes of society and others. This cannot continue. We cannot, in a post-COVID world, continue as usual. And therefore, in my view, philanthropy first must lead with that message that we must build a more fairer, equitable, and inclusive world. Philanthropy must first lead that message. But having gotten that message, philanthropy, in my view, must, beyond that message, take its place at the table of the reconstruction agenda. That is very, very important so that it brings its knowledge. Earlier on, Evans was talking about the data, information, learning, all that you are getting now. When the reconstruction agenda starts, that must be deployed to the conversation, because it is what is going to lead us to that desired, inclusive, and more equitable post-COVID world. Because right now we see a number of things. We see good signs sitting together with bad signs. What is a good sign? Because of COVID-19, we see a lot of investments going on in informal settlements, for example, for road networks, for water, for electricity, for security. That's great. But at the same time, we see concerning signals. I see it in my own house. the fact that my children go to private schools and that they can do classes by Zoom. And I know that my other family members in rural areas and other parts of Nairobi that go to public schools cannot be part of any education system. Tell me that we could also be laying foundations for greater inequalities going into the future. And that is something that philanthropy needs to take charge of, so that even through your education sector as KPF, this is a conversation that you need to have with the relevant authorities. Number 4, and my second last, philanthropy needs to bridge the trust gap. Ever since COVID-19 started in the world, we have seen the governments across the world leading the charge against fighting the virus. In many parts of the world, the trust gap between the governments and the people has actually been very big. And even in this country and in this region, you can still see many times that people still struggle to take the message of governments. But it also means that people have never taken government seriously. Going into the future, if there is any key message that we have gotten from this, is that competent and efficient governments do matter. But competent and efficient governments only matter when people, young and old, from all parts of the society, contribute to making that government, whether it is during elections or keeping it accountable between one election and another. In other words, philanthropy must continue to strengthen the civic engagement and government between the governed and the governors, because that is very key in terms of addressing not only this moment, but going into the future, whatever challenges we face. If we can find ways of reducing the gap of trust between government and the governed, that will be a huge contribution by philanthropy. Number 5, and the last but not least, philanthropy must lead by example. Earlier on, I think Evans laid his fingers on it. He talked about silos. Many times, a number of us in this country as institutions work in silos. I work in education, I don't work in health. I work in human rights, I do not work in cash transfers. I am in civil society, I don't work with government. I'm in private sector, I do not work with multilateral agencies. But even philanthropy itself sometimes works in isolated ways. And as we call for greater collaborations and the bridging of the gaps between the different sectors, philanthropy must lead by itself looking for ways to synergize even more, so that different types of philanthropies see that their value is enhanced if the other type of philanthropy that might be different from it is also enhanced. And this way, the overall result or impact of philanthropy becomes much more than the sum total of what people do individually. And I believe that these 5, together with many other things, would be great ways for philanthropy to lead us to a better world post-COVID-19. I thank you so much, my brothers and sisters, and wish you a great conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maurice. We totally appreciate your contribution. Your highlight has been very important, bringing out the elements of collective efforts because of the uniqueness in which philanthropy is placed in the matter that we are currently talking about, to the element of us deploying our full muscle, both as a network that we have as the philanthropy space, but again, in terms of our experience and the finances that we have access to as a space. Then the element of the stories of hope. And for that specific reason, I know my team will share with us a page, the COVID-19 page, that we have set up to share the amazing stories, the great stories of hope towards a positive narrative that we have to drive as a sector in terms of what is going on currently. To the elements of a fairer and equitable society that we have to really look at now and post-COVID-19. Again, we have to take our place on the table when we will be talking and discussing the reconstruction agenda. We have to take our space. And I think this is an area that we really need to take into consideration as we deliberate on our response as a sector. The trust gap issues, you know, it's now more obvious than ever that we all need a competent government. And there's a role that we have to play. And as Maurice puts it, both as the governed and the government, there's a critical role that we have to play in terms of ensuring that we have a competent government and we bridge the trust gap that we are talking about. Then we have to synergize. We have to lead by example. And this element of, you know, breaking the silos has been a core agenda for us as EAPN and KPF, and we need to really look into it. Before we move into now the specific initiatives and the opportunities that have been created by them, I want to take around 2 minutes to share with us the survey results of what we found out when we were running quick data collection in terms of what is happening within the philanthropy space in this region. And I want to request my team to project that on the screen, to share that on the screen. So in a survey that reached out to over 100 organizations, we looked at I think just go back to the first page of that results. So we were looking at how this pandemic has affected the philanthropy space in the East Africa region. And the first question that we were looking at getting some in-depth on was the funding dynamics and the adjustments that organizations have had to take to deal with this pandemic. And so we were asking whether there have been adjustments in allocations for funding. And we found out that 40% of the organizations had increased their funding allocations to their grantees to deal with the pandemic that we are facing today. So that was in terms of the funders. From the other end, the grantees, 23% of them were experiencing delays in terms of resources that were coming from funding from the donors. 37% of them were experiencing funding restrictions and some constraints from the funders as a result of the pandemic that we are dealing with. We will share this detailed outcome with you in our report for the meeting. In terms of relationships between the grantees and the funders, 27% of the respondents stated that they had a lot of flexibilities that they were enjoying from the funders that are funding various initiatives that they're running. 63% of them said that there was a special mitigation, a special fund allocation from their donors that they had access to. And then, unfortunately, 10% of them had a constrained relationship with their funders. That's a feedback that we got from that survey that we had undertaken. In terms of the operational environment, 72% of the respondents easily adapted to the working from home changes that we had to deal with. 20% had difficulties in working from home, and 6% needed further investment on digital infrastructure that for them to be more efficient in the work that they are doing. And this is a specific place that we are looking for partnerships from within the country and without to enable us to be more responsive as a sector digitally, because this thing for sure, whether we like it or not, the world has changed. And so we need to change with the changes that are coming. And so digital investment in digital infrastructure is an area that we are taking very seriously. Again, in terms of support to the government, 79% of the organizations are not working with the government. We've built and had a lot of efforts to at least reverse this, because this is a societal problem. It's a communal problem. And so if we have to break, we'll only succeed in this if we work very hand in hand with the government, both at the county level and at the national level. And so even within us, philanthropy interventions, philanthropy private sector, philanthropy government interventions, we all need to work together. And so that was a response that, well, it gave us the information, but it was also a call for action from our end. So only 21% of the organizations we conducted this survey on were working with the government. Whether they've given any provision for an emergency fund, 75% of them had a provision, had a provision for working with the government. 25% did not have that provision. Whether they've created new initiatives and programs, 92%, look at this, 92% of the respondents had created new initiatives and programs towards supporting COVID-19. 8% did not. And this shows you what we have been talking about from the beginning in terms of the responsiveness of the philanthropy that we are talking about. In terms of geographical areas, specifically in Kenya, most of them were working in Nairobi, in Mombasa, and in Kiambu County. In terms of the outreach, which I'll stop at that point because we will share this shortly with you in the report. In terms of the estimated outreach, 65% of the organizations had an outreach of between 1,000 and 5,000 people. We did not have any respondent which had an outreach above 5,000. 25% of them had reached between 500 and 1,000, and 10% of the organization had reached between 100 and 500. Lastly, which is a very important conversation for today, collaborations. Whether they were willing to be engaged in collaborating with other organizations, other government agencies, 100% of them were willing to collaborate. And the areas that they were looking at collaborating in were in terms of the hand washing machines, looking at the education sector in specific, because that is one of the biggest areas that has been hit by this pandemic. The food security conversation, most of these organizations were willing to be engaged and willing to collaborate with the government to ensure that food security is attained. So water, sanitation, and hygiene, education. So those were the three main areas that the respondents were willing to be engaged in. I'll stop it at that point and invite my colleague, Dr. Miriam Sidibe from NBCC, to just highlight for us opportunities which have been created by that partnership and collaboration between the philanthropy space in Kenya and the other development actors, including the private sector, the government agencies, and other efforts that are in that specific collaboration. So Dr. Miriam, you are welcome, and thank you all.
Thank you so much, Evans. I just wanted to double check whether I will be in a position to share my screen.
Yeah, I think you should be able to.
It's telling me host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Okay.
I can talk, but I mean, I had a presentation ready to share.
Apologies. Please proceed.
Can you make me, can you give me the opportunity to share?
Technical team, please, can we sort out that? Miriam, as they sort out that, I think we can proceed.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So let me know just when it's possible to share. But I mean, what I wanted, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk today about the National Business Compact on Coronavirus. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. So my name is Miriam Sidibe. I'm a doctor in public health, and I have spent the last 15 years in Unilever. And over the last 2 years, I've joined Harvard as a senior fellow at the School for Business and Government. And I've just finalized my book, which is on brands on a mission, how to achieve social impact and business growth for purpose. And you know, one of the key areas that I've been looking at very actively over the last decades is obviously how do you create sustainable business models that are looking at both combining core businesses and philanthropy in a way that makes them more sustainable, and obviously understanding how policy engagement is absolutely key to making all of that happen. I happen to be based in Kenya, so I'm currently grounded here, and this is one of the initiatives that I have kickstarted, co-founded, and for which I'm chairing, which is basically a platform of collaborations between businesses and the UN family and non-governmental organization in order to launch, act locally and join forces globally to fight COVID-19. So I think for us, what is NBC? It is definitely an opportunity to act more locally, but also to join forces globally to win the war on COVID-19. It's starting in Kenya, but with the objective to expand the blueprint in more than Kenya, across a few other countries. So I'll take you through some of that. So we started with the premise on personal prevention measures and the fact that in order to win the war, we needed to make sure that we focus on personal prevention measures, because that would be key to avoiding any tragedy in Africa, is to step up on prevention and make sure that that gap is absolutely filled. So now if you think about what our mission is in National Business Compact, our mission is to limit the spread of infections by improving hygiene practices and contribute to protecting lives and livelihoods across Kenya and Africa. And for us, what was absolutely critical at the heart of this is, under the leadership of the Kenya government and endorsed by the UN family, is to bring together an industry-wide approach where we had the soap manufacturers and the hygiene companies and the key brands working together. And we also had, and here I'm talking about the Unilever, Reckitt Benckiser, Shandaria, Menengai, Baesdorf, EABL, PZ Cussons, Pwani. And then on the second bucket, we're looking at communications organizations, whether it is the Shujas, the Ogilvy, the associations of practitioners in advertising, and National Media Group, for example, is to really get to an opportunity where what we're trying to do is to get at the core of some of these companies, what they do for a living, to try to swift some of this towards responding to COVID-19 and trying to prevent the spread of infection. Obviously, we've been working with a dual approach of working with retail distributors such as the Copias and the Unilevers and some of these companies that have retail shops, as well as community organizations such as Shofco and as well as Rotary and Sanochi, to be able to get to the last mile, to really making sure that we access some of the poorest communities as well. This National Business Compact is hosted by the Marketing Society of Kenya, because we believe that communication is absolutely key, and as co-founded as well with AMREF. And of course, a lot of the work that we're doing is also with digital experts, because we realize that there's only so much face-to-face conversation that we'll be able to do. So our work has been guided and is being guided by the following principles. So one, the commitment to impact and long-term behavior change to prevent disease. Two, an adherence to sustainable market-based solutions, to really making sure that we understand how markets are and that we're going to make sure that businesses stay resilient, and that we understand that it's important that businesses continue operating. So therefore, it's important that we understand the market-based solution. We believe very much into transparency and contribution to the global effort for best practice sharing, and as well as collaboration and inclusive approach, which is, for us, commitment to coordination by really leveraging existing platform, which is why we're quite excited to be here with you today. So what we've been doing is working across 3 key areas. The first one is on communication. So how to work on a unified communication platform that supports what the Ministry of Health is currently doing. And for that effect, we've launched a 3-month-long national public advertising campaign that has been supported by trusted influencers. 2, access, so creating a distribution network, which is an e-commerce and reaching the last mile with existing affordable hygiene essential brands. And then 3, financing, so really equipping government quarantine facilities, aiding with the proper disposal of medical waste, and providing food and transportations of medical frontline workers. Last week, we sent doctors in Mandera for mass testing as well. So I think, and this is where it becomes really important for us, where philanthropy could really help, because communications and access communication has been very much done by core businesses. Access is where we've been buying a lot of hand washing facilities and trying to reach it, to send it to some of the most vulnerable. And that is very expensive, because the reality is, in order for people to really practice hygiene, they need to be able to have soap, hand washing facilities, and water all in the same place. And in that effect, we've created a flexi fund, which is basically hosted with AMREF, with an oversight committee led in organizations led by the UN, Marketing Society of Kenya, Kenya Associations of Manufacturers, as well as the Red Cross. So what we've achieved so far, we were launched in Nairobi on the March 16, 2020. We've raised over 70.2 million Kenya shillings in cash and kind contribution. And we have an estimated over 70 million Kenya shilling on pro bono work. And that includes today, for example, we got 16.5 million Kenya shillings from Citizen TV on flighting some of our assets. For example, our puppetry assets in all local languages. We've initiated Commercial Corona media campaign with a current reach of 1.8 million households for TV, radio, and out of home over 10 million people with billboards across the country. We've identified 7,500 hand washing hotspot facilities across Kenya. We've already reached over 2,500. We've secured endorsement by the UN family and the Kenya Ministry of Health. All our materials are cleared by the Emergency National Health Task Force. We've appeared in Forbes Africa, BBC, Daily Nation, Business Daily, CNBC Africa, Webblog. We've been mentioned this week by IFC and World Bank as the blueprint of partnerships to follow for the region and globally in terms of how we do a connection of both core businesses and philanthropy. So I mean, sorry, I had slides with a few of the TVCs and the puppetries that you could have seen, but I can circulate that with the rest of the team. But I think the key for us is, and another big element that we did this week is actually support a new work stream that we launched with the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperative, which is on agriculture, nutrition and food security. And in this essence, we're currently at the moment preparing and working on a communication that will go to the general public as well as the farmers and the consumers to make sure that we are communicating what's required to keep people's immunity up and to make sure that food security is something that's addressed through a combination of both food parcels, communications, as well as distributing of seedlings for kitchen gardens as well. So the way we're governed is that we've got a board, and the board is made out of AMREF, UN Family, MSK, CAM, as well as the head of the Secretariat and the NBCC chairperson. Then, and there is an NBCC Secretariat, and under the NBCC Secretariat, there's different core areas that we're working on: communications, WASH, now we've just added food security, digital behavior, PR and branding, and then resource mobilization, where the Flexi Fund sits with AMREF, with an oversight committee, which is made of some of the board members, and then basically supports Kenya country team deployment as well. So I think in terms of who's in our team, I'm the chair and the co-founder of the National Business Compact. Maggie Rariera is the head of the Secretariat. And currently we've got volunteers on each one of the work streams, and we're currently looking for resources to support the Secretariat, continue and extend what they're currently doing. So I think that's quite a lot of work that's been required. We have a couple of funding streams that have been shared with a few investors as well, and some of the players are around the table as well, just to find out how we can strengthen and extend this work as well. In the core team member at the moment, we've got Gitinji Gitai is the CEO, AMREF co-founder, Fyodor Njoroge, chairman, MSK co-founder. In the core team, we also have Ruben Velenga from the UN SDG platform, Edward Oswe from MSK, Asha Mohammed from Red Cross, Desta Leku from Partnership AMREF, and Justin Apsi from Unilever East Africa MD. And as advisors globally, we've been working with Jane Nelson from the Corporate Responsibility Initiative at HKS, Paul Coleman, as well as Business Fights Poverty. McKinsey has been supporting us, and then obviously very strong Kenya representation with the Assistant Minister of Agriculture, Anyaga, of Health, Mercy Mwangangi, and as well as Manwa, and then with the support of Sid Chatterjee. So we are looking for resources to replenish our Flexi Fund. I think you see results coming pretty quickly, as you've seen already what we've been able to do in less than 8 weeks. And we are trying to find ways in which we obviously transform this into more of a systemic approach moving forward beyond COVID-19. So that's also something that we've been working on quite actively as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think of importance to us as the sector is the contribution that the members of the forum has already put into the Flexi Fund. But I'm seeing Sandra asking you, what is your short and long-term picture of success? If you can just take 1 minute, please, to answer that, then we'll be able to move on.
WASH and food securities are well articulated and are done during this period, because there's no time to waste. People need to have the right communication in the right languages, and making sure that behavior change is happening ASAP. So that's the first part. The second part is to make sure that all our 7,500 hotspots of hand washing facilities are actually delivered, and that we kickstart the food parcel and the kitchen gardens element as well of distribution. So that's another huge element that we're trying to do. And when I mean the communication, I also mean the digital behavior change campaign. So that's really good. I think long-term success for me would be that the NBC transforms itself into a mechanisms for addressing other eventual crisis that could be happening in the country, and saying that this is a mechanism in which private sector can put some of their philanthropy money as well as core businesses as a way to respond quickly, with a lot of agility, not a lot of bureaucracy, because we're not hosted in, in some of the companies or organizations that would stop that. So I think there's a little bit of agility around that. I think that for us is absolutely critical. That it transforms itself into an agile, a compact that is able to respond to a crisis in the future. But I think for now, given that we don't know how long this crisis of COVID-19 is here with us, the ability is to make sure that we're equipping the population with what's required for return to the new normal, as we call it.
Thank you. Sorry. Arif just gives us his area that is around collaborations and the multi.
Thank you very much, Evans, and good morning, folks. Pleasure to be with you. I coordinate the SDG Partnership Platform at the UN Resident Coordinator's Office, but being very heavily involved in the co-creation of the Kenya Philanthropy Forum with Evans and KCDF and Aga Khan Foundation. So delighted to be here. I'll just stay a bit focused in terms of opportunities, I think, moving forward. First of all, just to let you know, as you can imagine, the UN has been extremely central in the coordination and a number of other networks and sectors around strengthening the response to COVID-19. There have been very good signs of solidarity. A lot of core funding and supports are coming through to the government appeal, and we've been working with multiple ministries at the Office of the President and the team. Within that, we have also launched a UN flash appeal of $267 million to address a program that's been developed by the UN agencies. We have a one UN footprint of 21 agencies, quite a large a group of partners. And so we're quite well positioned to work in a whole of society response to this whole of society issue. And within that, the flash appeal is targeting 10 million most vulnerable Kenyans around issues of health, around issues of food and nutrition security, around issues of water, a number of issues around psychosocial support, particularly going out to communities that are very remote, to communities that are extremely vulnerable. As Maurice mentioned, we have an opportunity now to think about how does a crisis like COVID help us think through, sorry for the helicopter flying overhead, how does a crisis like COVID remind us that civilizations have come and gone, and over time, one of the opportunities that many civilizations have learned is building resilience and building from a future vision of almost reinventing itself. So how can we in a philanthropy sector and in a whole of society approach in Kenya think about some of the key principles of building back better? Can we think about a much stronger opportunity as civilizations to help each other, to work much more closely together, to converge sectors? I think this is a really important one. How do we bring philanthropy, private sector, multilateralism, the government, civil society together in very concrete, practical ways? And how do we build that trust and that solidarity? And I think this is happening remarkably well currently in the Kenyan context. The other one, of course, to think about is within this approach, how do we create clear alignment with what government is trying to do? As Maurice mentioned, governments are far too important as a central driver of policy and legislation for us not to work closely with government. We need to address gaps, we need to address weaknesses, but we need to come together in terms of working with government. So some of the opportunities have been around what Miriam has described really well, the National Business Compact, and we are part of the consortium, and we're delighted to be part of that within the UN family. We've also been interested in working with the team on expanding the work stream to food and nutrition security, particularly around behavior change messaging, around nutrition, around strengthening nutrition opportunities for Kenyans in their own kitchen gardens, looking at critical nutrients, especially for children, etc. The other one is we have the National Advisory Board for Impact Finance. There's a task force of financing networks, banks, venture philanthropy, private equity, pensions, cooperatives. And as we drive this task force, which I chair currently, we're looking at how the national advisory boards for impact globally and in countries like South Africa have come together and created de-risking funds, have created new innovative financing instruments to bring greater private capital and more blended finance around some of the critical priorities in countries. So can we do that in Kenya? Can we come together as part of this continuum of blended finance? And can philanthropy play a really critical role in that life cycle of investments? And this is very, very important because philanthropy is agile, is grassroots oriented, has a certain value system it comes from, and is able to test and pilot innovative approaches that private sector and governments can scale up when they work. So I think that's a really important area. And so for those who want to discuss blended finance opportunities, who want to discuss some of the innovation opportunities, we also have an SDG Accelerator Lab we launched with government last September. And there's been just last week a hackathon around COVID-19 with the Ministry of ICT and Youth. The next area is around food and nutrition security. We have launched a strategy around food and nutrition security pillar within the SDG platform, but working very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture. And we've co-created the Agriculture Sector Network of Kenya, which is really all your value chain business member organizations, your BMOs across the sector, both in crops, but also in livestock and in aquaculture. And here there are critical opportunities for us to play this balance between protecting lives and livelihoods. In a country like Kenya, we know that we need to protect both. We need to think also about the post-COVID economic response, with our GDP forecasts moving from 6% down to less than 2%, and potentially Africa being in recession for the first time ever. We need to think about how we want to build back stronger into the future. And that's where I think institutional strengthening is absolutely critical. Stronger institutions are really a secret formula for building and underwriting resilience into the new post-COVID world. How can we create these partnerships between philanthropy and other institutional sectors in order that we have this solidarity and convergence moving into post-COVID era? We have interesting opportunities to protect youth livelihoods, to protect specific value chains that are also critical value chains for our food supplies. Whilst we're locked in partially, food supplies, critical movement of both health and food and nutrition supplies is critical. How do we protect the SMEs there? And in turn, how do we protect jobs? There is an initiative for protecting youth opportunities, to have every young person either get trained, have an opportunity to be employed, have an opportunity to be an entrepreneur, or have an opportunity to go for further learning. And this opportunity under Generation Unlimited has President Kenyatta as the global champion now. He has created a steering committee around Generation Unlimited, and this steering committee is being co-led by CS Joe Mucheru. Ruth Kagia from the Office of the President is heavily involved, and UNICEF and the UN family are strongly supporting this. Here there are great initiatives around creating an Africa marketplace. Can we give young people an opportunity to volunteer for community service, to earn points which can allow them to either pick up training, pick up volunteering opportunities, pick up training opportunities, pick up enterprise counseling and mentoring. So there are opportunities to help young people essentially become the masters of their own destiny, to start becoming empowered, to start looking for opportunities, and at the same time provide community service and earn these credits. So some interesting opportunities. If you want to know more about that, we'd be happy to let you know. Our health window in the SDG partnership platform has been working very closely, as Miriam described, on the National Business Compact for COVID. And there are a lot of opportunities around also reaching very marginalized communities. And we have teams in various county blocks. The UN has established about 80 full-time staff supporting the government in very critical areas, and also supporting the idea of duty of care. You know, what are the minimum supports we need and protocols we need to protect frontline workers in the fight against COVID? And so these have been really useful opportunities. I'd also like to say that there's great opportunities around human resources support. For example, with Kenyatta University Hospital, we're looking to mobilize resources to hire about 100 nurses and ancillary staff as they pick up the overflow from Bagati Hospital of COVID positive patients, a 21-bed intensive care unit as well, and also supporting as much as possible the production of PPEs, ventilators, and the like, working with UNIDO and UNDP and some of our UN agencies. There are specific opportunities that are available also around working with service clubs, around outreach, or organizations that would like to do good but are not quite sure how they can get involved, through an initiative with the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, where they've created what's called Pamoja Imara, which is 50 agencies coming together, including the Red Cross and MREF and others, to try and reach organizations that are not traditionally involved in this kind of humanitarian support. And we've linked that with the Kenya Humanitarian Partners Forum, which has over 100 NGOs and UN agencies working together. So there is no lack of initiatives that are multi-sectoral and that can bring the power of philanthropy and the support of philanthropy into these immediate short-term responses. But I'd like us to think also about building back better. How do we position and structure philanthropy conversations with government, with multilaterals, with private sector, in a way that post-COVID, philanthropy is a key, valued, and important partner in this continuum of blended finance. I will stop there, and thank you very much for this opportunity. If you'd like more information, we're very happy to share information on any of these initiatives that are currently ongoing, including tracking of human rights and other types of monitoring, particularly in slum areas, particularly in marginalized parts of the society, where we need to also ensure that there is a strong balance between standing down and locking down and distancing ourselves, but also protecting dignified human rights. So there are institutions and organizations that are very active in that area too. I will share and thank you.
Thank you so much, Arif. So we just wanted to highlight the opportunities which are coming out from these collaborations we are involved in, bringing together the government, the philanthropy, private sector, the multilateral. Specifically, today we had an opportunity to see the NBCC, and I know most members here involved in the operations of that specific collaboration. Arif has talked about the National Advisory Board on Impact Investments, singling out blended financing as a key element of that task force. And again, the philanthropy sector is adequately represented in that specific conversation. I will skip one collaboration for now, the one between us and the national chambers to come a little bit later. There's also the ongoing efforts between KEPSA, Philanthropy, the AMREF, and the other team on Pamoja Imara. So there's quite collaborations going on, and we will see how to share this best with you as key actors within the philanthropy space in Kenya, for us to bring our efforts together in dealing with this pandemic. I want to now go into specific, and I'll only highlight, we'll give one opportunity to Henry Kilonzo of Safaricom Foundation to just talk to us about the capacity of domestic philanthropy community as we look at enhancing the national capacity in responding to COVID-19, and how this pandemic again has affected the work of philanthropy community in Kenya. Then after that, we'll take in one more contribution from the government. Then we'll open up the space for conversation and for us to really see what is it that we can do together and what opportunities can we pursue as a forum. Henry, over to you.
Good morning, all, and thank you for joining us in this very informative conversation. My name is Henry Kilonzo. I am a senior manager with Safaricom and M-Pesa Foundations in charge of programs. Early in the year, I think most of us could not imagine us being in the situation where we are in. We had our annual plans ready to start execution. We had our annual budgets. We even had our annual resource mobilization, strategies. And within a very short time, all of us got surprised because within a very short time, we had to come to a halt with some of the activities and projects that we had planned. But does this mean life has stopped? No. While the priority currently is on the response to COVID-19, we still believe that other initiatives from these different stakeholders are still ongoing. We still have governance, which our colleague in this conversation has talked about, has still to be kept on check. We still have livelihood programs. We still have other development programs, which are still ongoing. What has happened now is reprioritization, thinking of the pandemic, its impact, and looking at the available opportunities to stop the spread and get life back to normal. As a network, we have a lot of opportunities. And one thing that we pride ourselves is the reach to almost all parts of this country. We've worked with the different partners. It may be we are in health, we are in livelihoods, we are in governance, we are in education and other sectors. And the reach provides an opportunity for us to work with the communities based on the national and international practices of the pandemic. We have the know-how of the context on the ground. And you'll allow me to make reference to HIV and AIDS pandemic, which has been with us for now almost 30 years. And when we started, it first came to this country in 1984. We can read, or we know the challenges that the country went through, and we had a lot of learnings on how to handle such a pandemic. And today, we are living, with the virus. Life went back to normal. Different WHO and other sectors guidelines are being implemented. And I'm not seeing us, getting different from the approach that we had with HIV, that based on the recent communication from WHO that the pandemic may be with us, it may end up being endemic. So there is a lot of learning that we will be able to, bring to COVID-19 and see how we can now normalize, in quotes, this life and things continue normally. So bringing on board, the learnings from previous learnings, in our different sectors to the response, I think that will be critical. I've talked about resources that we had planned for in terms of budgets, and these have been affected. We have the government guidelines on, prevention around social distancing, restricted travel, community engagement, stakeholder engagement through meetings and others. While we still have the technology, which provides opportunities for us as an enabler to ensure that some of the things continue, we definitely know that there are some activities, there are some initiatives which definitely cannot continue as earlier planned. This calls for flexibility, as one of us has talked about. Flexibility around what really is critical, flexibility around what will make us achieve the planned objectives, planned outputs by the end of the year, and ultimately the planned outcomes. Flexibility around the budgets. And this calls, for some humility, if I can use that word, as negotiating with the different resource providers. If we are the resource providers ourselves, then negotiating with the implementers on the ground who understand the context better, and looking at what are the opportunities that we have to move budgets around in line with the reprioritized work plans to ensure that we continue to deliver outcomes to the different communities that we serve. We know the study by Yetu initiative that was done 2 years ago, titled Kenyans Giving, and we saw the results that yes, Kenyans give. Stakeholders, different organizations, in the informal settlements, in the rural Kenya, meeting the immediate needs of communities around food, around water, about PPEs for prevention of COVID-19. This means if we can be more organized in terms of the way we give, if we can be more organized in the way we plan, together we can achieve more. And I've talked about our ability to reach and then the wealth of knowledge that we all have. And if we use this, then we have the opportunity to support the government initiatives and ensure that we protect our communities from the pandemic. We have the role of technology, which is very, very important. And I think in the introductory remarks, we talked about the inequalities that this pandemic has really brought to fore, that within the cities, where connectivity is good, where parents are able, children, learning is ongoing. But we still have our brothers and sisters who in the rural areas have their children at home and they're not able to access learning. We have the opportunity here, as a sector, to showcase what technology can do. We do not know how long this will take, hence the need to continue innovating around what we know best, and also looking for creating new ideas to ensure that communities' life is normalized around education, around health, and among others. Just as a caution here, we realize we have a lot of reprioritization around COVID. But my fear is, come maybe 5, 6, 7 months later, we may be wondering how to respond to the disease burden in this country. Reading around what is happening around the human resources for health, there is a lot of movement of human resources from their core work now to respond to COVID. A lot of reallocation of resources. And there seems to be less talk and less, response in terms of what is happening around maternal and child health, what is happening around non-communicable diseases and others. So I'm seeing a situation where we will have a high disease burden post-COVID, as we shall also be responding to the challenges around economic and unemployment in this country. As Safaricom, what have we been able to do since COVID, and what are we doing currently to respond? Quickly, since we are a telco company, we've been encouraging, Kenyans to work from home. And in March, we had our bandwidth, doubled, what we call fiber to the home. We've been able to zero rate, all e-learning websites that host educational materials. We've been supporting the businesses, for example. You realize we expanded the M-Pesa wallet, what we call the double wind fiber to the business. People can save more. People can transact more on daily basis. And also, we are making a difference to the lives of the most vulnerable in the society. You may have seen in the different media around things around Bonga for Good. And then as Safaricom and M-Pesa Foundation, we were able to donate 200 million to the COVID-19 emergency fund. I also know the toll-free, the toll-free line 719, which is hosting, which Kenyans actions with Kenyans. We also host around 300 doctors at our premises to support different Kenyans who call on the 719. We also supporting through M-Pesa cash disbursements to the vulnerable households, and also we have been able to zero rate the pay bill payments to all health facilities in Kenya. From specific programs, we have the COVID philanthropy responses within the Safaricom and M-Pesa foundations. And on weekly basis, we receive proposals from different organizations, from counties, from national governments, from sector players, from individual Kenyans, looking for opportunities to support the Kenyan community to prevent the pandemic. And this range from requests for PPE, water, sanitation, and hygiene, awareness creation, among others. So these opportunities, as Safaricom and M-Pesa Foundation, that, and for the everybody in this conversation to know, we still open. We are receiving this and directly working with our partners at the community level, working with the national government, working with the county governments to supplement or to contribute to the ongoing initiatives at the national level and at the community level. Lastly, I talked about the plans that we had. There will be need for us to go back and, based on learnings from previous engagements, ask ourselves, what is more important to us as a sector? What is more important to us as organizations? And plan around that. Working alone will not help. My view is working through others, supporting ongoing programs, welcoming others to deliver together, will be able to achieve more impact than working alone. Lastly, you realize the Kenyan community is very resilient. And for some of us who may have traveled out of the city or out of the towns where we are usually based, you realize in some areas things are going on, other areas things have stopped. And Kenyans are innovating each and every day. And each one of us has a responsibility to reach out and know what can really make a difference into a particular community. And if something that works, please shout and let everybody know and explore how to partner in order to achieve more. So from the Safaricom and M-Pesa Foundation and from Safaricom PLC, we are in the forefront to supporting the different partners, supporting the county government, supporting the national government, supporting sector players to do what we can do, what we call, even if it's that very little thing, to play my part to ensure lives are lives are saved and also transformed. So far, as Safaricom, we've invested more than 6.5 billion towards this pandemic. Over to you, Evans.
Thank you so much, Henry. Four issues that I've really taken note of from the flexibilities that you've talked about, looking at prioritizing on critical issues to the reallocation of resources. Then one key element around why organizations like KPF, EAPN exist around advocating for organized giving, to the conversation around knowledge, technology, and innovation, to the last element that you've talked about on leveraging and sharing on opportunities for partnerships. I think that is very critical for this conversation. And I want us now to just take, because of time, I'll only give, I'll request the speakers to take a maximum of 5 minutes so that we get some time for the other people to contribute. So we'll just take 5 minutes to hear from the government side, and representing the CAS for Agric and Nutrition, Jen Wambugu, over to you, please. Jen, are you there? All right, if Jen is still preparing, then we'll take time with Nadia to just share with us the tool that they've come with, that blood water, to enable community monitoring and response tracking, specifically on COVID-19. Nadia.
Thank you very much, Evans. Good morning, everyone. I'm sending in the chat a link which will connect you to our website that has the monitoring tools and supporting guidance documents available for public download. So you can just download that as I walk you through. I have no intentions of taking more than a few minutes to share a little bit about where this tool came from and how it relates to the work that Bloodwater is doing with its partners. So just to give you a little bit of background for those of you who maybe we've not interacted before, Bloodwater is a grant-making organization that supports civil society organizations working in the WASH and HIV sectors specifically, and we pair with grants institutional strengthening. So I just echo what Arif had said, the importance of institutional strengthening as a very foundational and core pillar to sustainable development responses and just sustainability within the civil society sector. This tool, or today's conversation, from my perspective, will focus on community actors in the COVID response and our system strengthening support, which is part of a larger institutional and grant funding pivot to prioritize and then integrate COVID-19 responses into our model of grant making. And that is from the premise, I've heard a lot of people this morning discuss new normal and getting back to normal, or when this passes. I think our perspective based on all the literature is that this is not a passing cloud. This is something that is foundationally changing our contexts as public health practitioners, and it's a disease that is likely to be with us for a mid to long term. And so with that perspective in mind, there's the immediate emergency response, and also just to what Henry had said, if we utilize lessons learned and models from the HIV response, there was an emergency response, and then there was a shift to adapting to the presence of HIV in our world from a multi-sectoral response. So that's kind of the same posture that we're taking. And just a little bit about the context of this tool and where it came from. Prior to the confirmation of cases in our region, we began having conversations with our grant partners to prep and to prime them for what was anticipated as the inevitable arrival of COVID-19. And those conversations were framed from utilizing best practices in countries with infection control successes. And this was to inform and equip conversations as to what local responses would look like. Our partners extend beyond Kenya. We have partners in 5 countries in the region. And so we focused on first 2 areas, which was community prevention and preparedness, the second being community monitoring, and then the third, which emerged within a month ago, and not from the beginning, which was community livelihood safeguarding, so community relief. And the focus of communities being at the center, that's very missional to Bloodwater. We are a community centered grant maker. We put communities in the center of everything that we do. And so our view was, how can we champion community-based organizations working in health? And this is really from the perspective of community health structures. Community health service organizations have always been at the center of health work in the region, being the critical link to the formal health sector in contexts where either access to health services because of finances or because of infrastructure is not something that is easy. And so Bloodwater took the initiative then to develop the COVID-19 community response monitoring tool and its supporting indicator guidance as a system strengthening supportive mechanism to the work that our partners were doing. We adapted it to make it a publicly accessed tool that has nothing to do with our grant making and grant reporting, so that it's something that other implementing partners that are working in a community context, or grant makers and philanthropic organizations that are funding community-based responses can use, can adapt this tool to track community contributions to the COVID response. And so with this, there is the assumption that we recognize that as the world is coping with the pandemic, with a great emphasis on the formal health system, looking at hospitals and the health sector's capacity to diagnose and to treat COVID, there is a gap in our context here where community health structures that have always been the critical component for health at community level, they will continue to be the frontline for health in our context. And so this is a tool that is designed to equip community health organizations with an ability to track their prevention efforts, their establishment of hygiene facilities, PPEs in community context, as well as to track their contributions. And this is going to be so critical. I think we're in the midst of this now, and we will continue to see the importance of this for community actors to track their contributions to ongoing disease monitoring and surveillance in community contexts, so that they are able to connect with local health facilities, be it private or public, and then to report to governments, to report to multiple stakeholders what their contributions are and how they're able to track the emergence of disease in their communities. And then the last piece, as I mentioned, is around livelihood safeguarding. This, I think, will prove to be part of the long-lasting impacts of COVID as our economies continue to be affected by this disease, and our need to control movement as a result of it, that the livelihood response and tracking relief efforts was the third component that was added in. And so the last piece I just want to say is that to safeguard what we see as a capacity building institution, as a much needed service quality backstop, we have developed a guidance document that serves to define what the minimum standards are for COVID prevention, hygiene promotion, and livelihood interventions at community level. We have taken best practices from WHO, the AUCDC, from other rapidly emerging studies that are being published to say, what are the service standards required to do COVID prevention, to equip households and communities with hygiene facilities, with hygiene mechanisms for prevention? What are the minimum communication components that are necessary to say we have adequately equipped people and then what is the minimum standards for relief in an emergency context. So that's the purpose of the guidance document, is to serve as a quality service backstop. You are free to share this tool. You are free to utilize it, to modify it. It is viewed from our perspective as an open source resource. We validated it, excuse me, with our partners, but it's something that you can just modify and use as your context requires. And we are updating this. This is the second version of this tool. We continue to update it as government guidance changes, as standards change, and as we continue to learn more about the virus and what informs effective responses. So on this website, it will be updated automatically. You can just check back frequently to make sure that you have the latest version. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadia. From our last meeting that we had and the series of meetings that we've had around COVID-19, one major concern that has been there was the issue of tracking and monitoring. And so this is very critical in supporting the space, monitor, track, surveil, and report on how, on the ongoings around COVID-19 at the community level. I like the element of institutional strengthening. That really is an issue that we really have to look into, adoption of best practices. And even as we talk of the multi-sectoral approach to this matter, we need to have communities at the center of all the interventions that we are talking about. I see Anthony saying the guidance and the tool is very comprehensive, and appreciating the tool. For the interest of time, once again, members, I want to request that I see by a show of hands, any participants with a matter to share with us, please just raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll invite my colleague, Andrew, to again share with us another tool that we've come up with towards collecting data beyond the COVID-19 pandemic that we are facing, and a page that a tool that we have also come up with to enable you share the success stories that you are meeting, that you are doing as organizations, and how we are looking at that to support the space that we are serving. Andrew, over to you. And please make it as short as possible as we wait for other speakers to raise their hands with any contributions that they have. Andrew, thanks.
Okay, Evans, thank you for inviting me to speak on the data portal. The East Africa Philanthropy Network has come up with a data portal as a one-stop shop for comprehensive funder profiles. This is in a drive to create more evidence-based actions, and it aims to gather data while ensuring the best standards of data security, integrity, reliability, and authenticity. For better familiarization of it, I have shared a link on the chat that you may be able to visualize as I take you through it. So through the latest technology of GIS mapping, we have come up with a portal that between Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, it shows the donors that are giving in terms of philanthropy, the grantees who are receiving these funds and the dollar amounts, the areas of specialization, and also the location, where the grantee is located, where the donor is located. It also shows subsectors. For example, some donors would be funding health, some grantees would be doing initiatives in health, initiatives in disability, environmental sustainability, WASH, and so on and so forth. This was born out of a need to create more evidence-based action, and it ensures that there's less, what do we call it, that there's no duplication of resources, and also ensures collaboration between the actors, the different actors. I will be doing an email to all of you to invite you kindly to sign up for this and just go through it. The link is on the chat. I'll go through it in detail on the email, and feel free to just peruse and reach out to us for that. In the interest of time, I'll hand back to Evans so that we can have our other speakers present. Thank you, Evans.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I think from the first speaker, who was Maurice, we had the issues around us being able to sit on the table that will look into the reconstruction agenda as the philanthropy space. And for us to effectively do that, we really have to do this thing that we've always dreamt of as a sector, in terms of how do we demonstrate our contribution as the philanthropy space to national development. And so this portal that we are talking about, I must say that most of the philanthropy actors in Kenya are already in that platform. And if there's anyone here who is not yet on it, please be on it, because the authenticity and the quality of the data that we will be able to derive from that platform strongly depends on the numbers, because we want to be as representative to the sector as possible. And so the more numbers we have on it, the more representative the knowledge that we generate from it is. I think currently there are over 160 organizations already on it, foundations and trusts, and we want to invite you to be part of it. We will be sharing the first knowledge pieces from it, which will really show how the sector is in terms of the contributions that we are making, the geographical locations of the projects, with a view and aim of ensuring in similar spaces and working in same geographical. Today I can say we are already above average, but we want to move towards being perfect, because we want to position the institution of EAPN and the National Philanthropy Forums as centers of excellence in terms of knowledge generation and creation. And so we welcome you. For the interest of time, can I give us some few minutes? I'm seeing no one has raised his or her hand. So if there's anyone who wants to jump into the conversation before I give it to Melvin or rather KCDF to tell us, or rather to update us on the efforts we are jointly pursuing towards having, let me not say foundations law, but an enabling environment for philanthropy in Kenya. So anyone, any matter around COVID-19? All right, now that I'm not seeing any hands, I also want to state that we are coming up with other platforms where we can share these initiatives that we are doing, where there are collaboration efforts that are going on, where you can see what to join in or what to contribute to as an institution, either individually or collectively. Melvin, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Evans. Again, just to reiterate, it's actually a foundations law, but I'll get to that. I think a lot has been said about the role of philanthropic organizations in Kenya, especially foundations and trusts. So I'm just picking up from that in the sense that we play a critical role, especially our bridging capacity, in terms of bridging resources to communities, or communities to where the resources are cannot be gainsaid. And we've had this conversation about creating an enabling environment for quite some time. So because again, the PBO is not getting the traction that we need, because again, we sort of facilitate processes in different legal regimes, depending on the organizations that we are working with. This is not to say that we are not supporting the PBO Act, but again, looking at the uniqueness of foundations and trusts, especially in this country over the years, again, we've thought about how can we ensure that that we remain a going concern as a sector. And we started thinking, how can we best place an enabling legal regime that can sort of accommodate us? You might say we are splitting hairs because some of us are registered either as non-governmental organizations through the NGO Coordination Act, or as trusts within the Trustees Perpetual Succession Act, or societies or companies limited by guarantee. And some of us, for instance, KCDF, we have two registration regimes. We are both a company limited by guarantee as well as a trust because of different reasons, but largely because of assets and because of what we do in terms of supporting communities and also, again, as we started looking at the legal structures that were there, we find that we are not ably suited in either of them, simply because of the things that we continue to do are fairly complicated, at the same time fairly comprehensive. And you have to appreciate that we are system thinkers. We look at the whole system so that we start getting rid of the silos that Arif was talking about. So as we continued thinking through, and we've done this for a long time, for some of us who've been in this space for the last 6-7 years, it's something we've been thinking about, and we tend to think this is a right moment for us to start thinking about a foundations law. So initially when we started, we wanted to come up with a new legislation, a foundations law, but the more we continued brainstorming and sharing ideas, and we've had 1 or 2 meetings so far this year, and we came to the conclusion that the best route, or what we might call the least path of least resistance, would be in terms of amending the trust law. The trust law, first of all, was, by the mere fact that it's a trust, it was meant to just hold assets and deal with a lot of succession planning. But we'd want to change that so that even foundations can be part of that, simply because, first of all, it's very expensive. For instance, I'll give the example of KCDF, having these 2 bodies, expensive in terms of the legal intricacies that come within it. And again, there is a very high likelihood, especially if the organization is not well structured, to have a vision runaway. So as we continue thinking about it, and again through some of us who are in this call, we opted to make amendments to the Trust Act. And what informs this move? First of all, we are looking at, the most important thing is actually not incentives, tax incentives, the way we've been sort of putting forward our claim, because we know globally tax incentives are being scaled down by most governments, especially now that there are deficits in terms of budgetary support. So to us, it's more, the center of all of this is actually governance and accountability. Trust laws have been proven to be more progressive and reactive to changing environments, and this changing environment, especially with COVID, because as we say, there's no post-COVID, gives you a very good understanding on how an environment can change. And if there are no system thinkers to sort of think through all these development issues that are happening from a community-centric perspective, then it's very easy for us to miss out in terms of the key role that we play in terms of the bridging capital that we have. I would dare say that the PBO Act was meant to regulate and manage relationships between PBOs and government. And the threshold of accountability for PBOs is fairly weak. So the other law that becomes perhaps a fairly robust law for us to exist is the company limited by guarantee. But as I said, we are taking a path of least resistance. The Company Act was reviewed in 2015, and it's a fairly comprehensive law. So it becomes very difficult for us to either try to change the law or come up with a new law, again, because of the timeframes. We are well aware a referendum is coming. And again, with the politics that is happening, it would, for us to come up with a completely new law, it would take us at least 2 years. So in terms of us doing amendments to an existing law becomes fairly important. Secondly, the flexibility that trust laws can accommodate more peculiar varied arrangements. For instance, if it's company limited by guarantee or even company foundations, how would you want it to be to stand on its own but still have some allegiance to the parent company? Then a trust becomes becomes a fairly good vehicle for you to be able to continue with the core mandates that you'd want to to have, either as an investment vehicle, if it's an endowment, or diversified partnerships they would want, and the trust levels that you have, either with your donors or with the communities that you work with. Then again, most of these foundations that continue supporting us, the Fords, the Rockefellers, or there's even the Safaricoms, we tend to see private wealth being a very important source of resources for some of the work that we do. I&M Foundation probably is the latest entrant. And all this private wealth, some of it is not situated in Kenya simply because of the legal frameworks that exist. But if these monies were to be repatriated back to Kenya, whether it's family trusts or company trusts, then it becomes easy for you to, as long as you show accountability of the organization, it becomes very easy for you to access some of these resources. So we tend to think, other than just looking at the sector internally, we're also looking at how can we also facilitate a better legal environment for private wealth to be hosted in Kenya, so that it's easy for us to also sort of get part of it as organizations or as individuals think of giving towards charitable intentions. Then the practicality of a trust law again becomes easy. For now, for you to be a registered trust, again, because the laws are fairly archaic, the one thing that you have to provide is trust. Immovable assets or successions center of some of the things we would want to learn. Again, this is not exhaustive, because the next level would be to do a gap analysis of the different laws with the intention of changing the trust law, not just in terms of how we operate in Kenya, but also benchmarking globally with other trust laws that are fairly progressive. So in a nutshell, that's how we would want to look at it. And again, we'll come to KPF members perhaps in the next 1 or 2 months now to thrash some of the things that you find difficult to operate because of the legal regime that exists, or to give more details, more inputs towards how we can better do the amendments and push the law in the next 8 to 10 months, if possible. So I would want to leave it at that, Evans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melvin. And so within the next 2 months, 1 or 2 months, we'll be able to come back to you as members of the forum. And anyone, I think, who wants to join the working group that has been established for this specific purpose, please feel free to get in touch with KCDF or us for that matter. So we will see what we will communicate the next steps in regards to this specific initiative. For the interest of time, I think I've used that word so many times today. We will share with you a tool, because the last thing that we were supposed to have a conversation around today was in regards to strengthening the forum, and time does not allow for that. And so we will share a tool where you can communicate with us in terms of the areas that you want us to focus on within this period that we are facing, areas which are of utmost importance to you, so that in the next meeting we can have those taken care of. We have all faced a challenge in terms of implementing the work plans that we had established for the forum and even for us as an organization. So what we had envisioned for 2020 and the growth that we had planned for the forum may not be met, but on the other hand, we still want to support your work, we want to support your efforts, and we want to have a well-coordinated and impactful space, even as we deal with the pandemic that we are currently facing. I also want to communicate, before I give time for closing remarks, that one of the sectors which has been affected heavily by this pandemic is the education sector. And so there is an ongoing effort to organize a webinar. Can we mute those who are not speaking? to have a webinar around the effects of this pandemic on the education sector and the opportunities which we are seeing for the sector going into the near future and even for the long term. So please, we will communicate that. The other opportunity that we have created as for our members is a partnership that we have worked out with the Tiger Woods Foundation. It's called the TGR Foundation, and it's around a professional development opportunity focused on STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, towards education and workforce development. And we will be sharing this opportunity first within the membership before we go to any other person outside the membership. So we will also share with you. If you are an organization in the education space or in the workforce development space, this is an opportunity for you. We will take care of the costs for the members of the forum and members of EAPN, and you are free to share the opportunity with one person to replace you or to represent you as an organization. And the opportunity is one, how do I put it? One person per organization. So if you recommend someone else, then so it's one member organization, one slot. So we will also share out that as our efforts towards developing the capacity of the membership, developing the capacity of the organizations within the philanthropy space in Kenya and East Africa as a region. So I want to give space for closing remarks within 2 minutes so that we can bring the meeting to a close. Anyone with any closing remarks, please? This opportunity is yours.
This is Henry. Thank you all. When I was speaking, I had a question which I could have asked, but thank you, Nadia, for bringing that up and also giving us the solution, because the question was around how do we document what we are doing? How do we share what we are doing? How do we get the best practices or promising practices from what we are doing so that it can form our current programming and also for the future? And I think the tool that you've shared will go, further in helping different organizations to document this. And thank you, because I see it's open source, so different organizations can use.
Thank you so much, Henry. Guys, I know at one point I had asked the representative from the government to just share with us what areas of focus they would want to see philanthropy jump into. And I think her microphone was off when we gave her the opportunity. Jen, if you don't mind, just take a minute or two to share with us what you had in mind before we bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Now?
Yes, we can hear you.
There was a lot of interaction in my phone and in my system. Good morning. My name is Bruno Ambogo from the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries, and Cooperatives. Sorry for the interruption that I've had this morning. That's called the ICT to help me set the system, which had an issue after I joined the meeting. On behalf of the government, I appreciate the diversity of the stakeholders, and thank you for driving this agenda on the national efforts. The food security agenda is key to bring out the efforts of the health sector and the food security and the health security issues that are being addressed by the government. Looking into food element is critical, considering the livelihoods of the farmers that are really affected by this COVID-19 pandemic. There's need to reflect on the role of each one of us, both the government and the community, the private sector community, and the development of the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. There is need for support of the various government efforts in terms of what the government is doing, so that we are able to be able to achieve more of this pandemic issue. The response we are getting from you, the philanthropy community, is very critical in terms of meeting the food and nutrition security issues. We have the various government policies and guidelines that need to come and to be brought onto course, especially at this time when the livelihood of the common person and the community at community level is affected. There is the guidelines in terms of improving food security and as well as nutrition. The issue of establishing home garden is very critical, and this is somewhere we are going to we are seeking support, that the family at household level can be able to be supported. So we, as a government, and the food security arena and the nutrition, we are seeking support that we can get the philanthropic community come supporting us in terms of making that the livelihood of the common mananchi, the livelihood of the farmer, the livelihood of the one who is sitting in the urban and also in the peri-urban area is also supported. So it's my wish that we are going to go this initiative that have already been shared. I missed quite a bit of some of them, but the ones I've listened to, it shows clearly there's a lot of effort being done, both by the private as well as other sectors, in addressing the key agenda also of the government in feeding its people. So thank you very much. You are welcome to support the line. The guidelines are there in our website, Kilimo website, both for market, food system, and also for nutrition agenda in the food and nutrition security. So you are welcome, and you can check in that Kilimo website. Sorry, I do not have the Kilimo website. It's very clearly there. You'll get all the guidelines that you can be able to pick up an area and support, whether it's in marketing of food, whether it's in the food, getting the food closer to those who really need it at this time. The guidelines are very clear. So you are very welcome, and thank you for the efforts that are in place that are supporting the government effort. Thank you. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. I think I want to say that the conversation on food security, the food security agenda, has been at the center of our efforts in terms of coordination. I know we are having a second webinar soon on top of the one that we had the other week, in terms of how do we work together towards food security, because it's for sure that the distribution channel has been interrupted, production channel has been interrupted. And so this is critical for our survival into the future as a nation. And we are combining that with the conversation around livelihoods, which has featured in this webinar today so many times. I think in summary, we are still saying that we need to embrace collaboration and partnerships, leveraging on each other's strengths and opportunities which are there as a sector to enable us be more responsive and more impactful in the work that we are doing. There's the element of data and knowledge. As KPF, as EAPN, we are committing to continue sharing and strengthening the data agenda so that we are able to really support the work that we are doing as a sector. The adoption of best practices, there's a lot that is going on. There are a lot of efforts which are going on as we speak, and we still want to commit as a forum that we will share with you all the best practices that we've shared, we've collected cross-border from within the continent, from outside the continent, as we seek at adopting practices which are strengthening the sector as a whole. We need to pull together. Again, the element of institutional strengthening is an area that we cannot stress much on further. The conversation on enabling environment, again, we will give you the updates and invite you for the next meeting that we are organizing probably in a month or two. The next webinar that we will be hosting for members of this forum and members for the philanthropy space in Kenya will be around education, because we've received a lot of interest and inquiries on what we are doing and what we can coordinate on behalf of the sector. Lastly, we have brought to the members of this forum and members of EAPN a capacity strengthening opportunity around STEM, and we will share out an email communication inviting participation of various actors to that specific opportunity within the day or latest by close of business tomorrow. I really want to appreciate each and every one of you for your contributions, for taking time to join in this worthy conversation. And now that everything is up and running in terms of existing collaboration channels, in terms of the initiatives that we are running either individually or collectively, we will have more of such, and we want to request that if called upon, please come, share with us your knowledge and share with us your experiences and the opportunities within the networks that you represent. We are also going to do an EAPN members webinar to just get cross-border learnings that we can share with our colleagues in Uganda and in Tanzania as we seek to strengthen the philanthropy space in the East Africa region. So asanteni sana, thank you so much for taking time, and we appreciate your contributions. We will share the proceedings of the meeting by close of business today, and please, should you be called upon to provide any data, to provide or contribute to any ongoing initiative, please support us. Thank you, keep safe and stay blessed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.